Hey, it's Rob Gigolo. Is it possible to overland to epic places without a 4x4? Answers to that question and more coming up. Hey, it's Travel Gigolo. So, overlanding without a 4x4. A couple of people have asked about this, and when we started overlanding, we did not have a 4x4. We had this awesome vehicle over here, which we call the Awesome Bar, because it's awesome and it's a station wagon, hence Awesome Bar. And this was our primary mode of transport for getting to the places that we wanted to visit. Now, we've done 2 of our epic trips and about 15,000 kilometers in total in this vehicle over here. A lot of that 15,000 kilometers was off tar road, so dirt road or gravel road, and it's done us pretty good. It's been a really fantastic vehicle and surprisingly comfortable as well. Now, this vehicle is not built to go to places that don't have roads. It's not intended for that. We have, of course, however, taken it to various places which don't have the kind of roads that it's designed for. So if you're gonna go overlanding with a vehicle like this, you need to have a lot of patience and a good sense of humor and a bit of time as well. So here's how, and here are a few of our experiences and some tips that I think would be good for anybody that wants to go overlanding, particularly if you don't have a 4x4 and you're going to use a typical city sedan like this. 1. What to consider when you're planning your trip. By far, with any adventure where you're going off tar roads, onto dirt roads or onto roads that are not very well made, for example, if they are dirt roads or are not dirt roads that are not very well made, the most important thing by far is clearance. So clearance is the thing that will constrain you the most, and that's basically the distance between the ground and the lowest part of your vehicle. That is the thing that will, to the largest degree, determine where you can and cannot go to and how quickly you can get there. Which brings me, of course, to the next point, which is time, and it will take you much longer, almost regardless of your clearance if you're driving a city vehicle like this. So we've done a lot of central and southern Namibia with this vehicle over here, and if you've been to those parts of Namibia, you'll know that there are almost no tar roads. It's almost entirely dirt road. And we traveled, for example, to Gamsberg. So we went to Sesriem and then to Gamsberg. So from Sesriem to Gamsberg, it's about 200 kilometers, which would normally take you about 2 hours, maybe a little bit more with a vehicle that is appropriate for those types of roads. It took us 7 hours in this car. However, that road was particularly corrugated and it was quite a bit up and down, so we had to get into quite a mountainous area where Gamsberg is, and that is the tallest mountain, I believe, in Namibia. So it was relatively difficult terrain to drive through because the road was very corrugated and there were some steep sections as well. So you can do it if you've got enough time and if you've got sensible clearance. So this vehicle has 180 millimeters of clearance, which is quite decent for a city vehicle. A vehicle like our Land Cruiser has significantly more than that, well over 200 millimeters of clearance, depending on how you measure it. But, you know, upwards of 240 millimeters, probably a bit more than that because the car is slightly raised. That does make a big difference. If you have a typical city vehicle that has less than 180 mils clearance, so probably 140, 150, 160, maybe even less if you've got a sporty type of vehicle, it's very difficult to go to many places overland. But this amount of clearance is pretty good to go to a lot of places. My view basically on clearance is that if you've got good clearance, it will take you to 80% of the places that you could ever possibly want to go for. And after that, there is when you need to start considering having a 4-wheel drive system. Now, comfort is the next factor. Overlanding vehicles generally have the right suspension or suspension set up for going over rutted and corrugated roads, and they're a lot more comfortable in those circumstances. They're not very comfortable on tar road, of course, because then they're all wallowy and soft. The nice thing about a vehicle like this is that it's got a relatively soft setup, so it is relatively comfortable. But you do feel all the bumps, you do feel all of the corrugations because it's not set up for that, and also because it's got relatively small wheels. So the impact of those bumps on the wheels is more significant than with something like our Land Cruiser, where it's got those massive wheels, small rims but massive wheels that are much better at absorbing that, and also there's not as much impact because of the greater diameter of the wheel. So we've spoken about time, we need to speak about space. And space is important because it determines how much you can pack in the vehicle. And the more you can pack, the further you can go for longer without having to buy stuff or replenish stock and all that sort of stuff. And of course you can take more stuff as well, and that makes you more comfortable. You're camping because you can have a nice tent and an awning and chairs and all that sort of stuff. So the less packing space you have in the vehicle, the more difficult it is, but it's not, or it should not be, a major constraint. Most places you're going to go to, you can find stuff that you need to buy on a daily basis, your food, etc. It's more the packing of stuff that gives you comfort within your camping scenario. So this vehicle is really great because the seats fold down, which means that you can pack quite a lot into it. So it's a station wagon and the seats fold down. So if you've got a vehicle like that, that the seats fold down, that does help. So, and if it's a station wagon or a hatchback, for example, and the seats fold down, it gives you a lot of space. So on an extended trip, you need a cooler box. Sometimes we used to use 2 cooler boxes, actually one that we used as an ice box to keep our meat frozen, and one that we used as a cooler box to keep stuff cool that was perishable. So if you pack a couple of those, and then we have a box for toxic stuff, so mosquito spray and things related to our braai, for example, charcoal, fire lighter and so on. And we've got a kitchen box, so we had a kitchen box where we used to keep all our edible stuff. So that takes up quite a bit of space in the car. Then add your tent and add your bags, and the further you go, the more you're going to pack into your bags. So space is important, and the more of it you have, the better. The next thing is fuel. So the more fuel you have, the further you can go. In most places that you're going to go to in South Africa, for example, where you are close to towns, the less fuel is of significance. If you start going to remoter areas, for example, in Namibia, where you've got to drive long distances in desert-like conditions where there's very few towns in between, very few filling stations, then fuel becomes something that you need to consider more significantly. Generally though, it's not a major consideration because there is fuel available almost all of the time in almost all of the places that you go to. It's very rare that you're going to have a lack of fuel in a place that you can go to and get to with this vehicle. The roads that you're going to travel on are important, and that's something very significant about overlanding with a vehicle like this here. So when you've got a 4x4, you don't really worry about that. You kind of just decide, I want to go over there, and then if there's a road that goes there, then you just go. When you've got a vehicle like this, you need to be concerned about the type of road that's going to get you to where you want to go to. So a couple of important things in that respect. One is you've got to check it out when you're planning, check out what kind of roads you're going to be dealing with. In South Africa, there are many roads in the Northern Cape, for example, in the Western Cape, that are not tarred roads. They're generally quite navigable with a vehicle like this here, but quite slow. In Namibia, another good example, a lot of roads that are not tarred, especially in the southern regions of Namibia, where again, you can go with a vehicle like this here, but it's going to be quite slow. One very important tip is having a proper spare wheel. Vehicles like this generally come with a little Murray biscuit spare wheel, which is not ideal in a lot of circumstances. Now, we've learned that lesson the hard way. We went all the way to the Tankwa Karoo National Park, and that's a road that is famous for eating tires, and we lost a tire. And then we were traveling on this little Murray biscuit, and it's not ideal because you're traveling over dirt roads. Sometimes they're a bit corrugated, and that's not the type of wheel that you want to have on there. Ideally, you should have a proper spare wheel that is the exact equivalent as the other wheels on the car. So where can you go with a vehicle like this? To most places. You can go to almost every national park in South Africa with a vehicle like this. There are places in some of those national parks that you will not be able to navigate with a vehicle like this because they are strictly 4x4 routes. So you can go to almost every national park in South Africa and you can travel around the national park and explore it as well. It's very different when you go to places like in Zimbabwe, for example, when we went to Matusadona and Chizarira and even Mana Pools to an extent. Very difficult to get to those places because of the roads to those places, and once you're there as well, sometimes difficult to navigate to. So to go to a place like that, you need a 4x4. If you're going to be driving on sand or beach, like driving into the south of Mozambique, for example, it's ideal to have a 4x4 too. So there are places that it's very difficult to drive to with a vehicle like this here because the roads are not great, or if it's muddy, in particular in the rainy season, or if you're driving on soft sand like you would in the Namakwa National Park, for example, along the coastal section, or like you would in Mozambique along the roads that go close to the coastline. So where can you go? Absolutely anywhere where there's a tar road, that's in sensible condition, of course. Most places where there is a dirt road, provided it's a properly constructed dirt road. So if it's a dirt road that's clearly marked as a national road or a provincial road or a local road, whatever the case is, then you will in most cases be able to traverse that road with a vehicle like this. Might be a little bit slow going. For example, right now we're at River Run, which is on the Vaal River, close to Vredefort and Paris. It's about 20 kilometers of dirt road to get here from the nearest tar road, and it's a relatively easy-going dirt road. It's a well-traversed gravel road and it's in decent condition. So it's quite easy to drive here and we had no issues. In fact, we drove here at night, unfortunately, because we got a bit of a delay in leaving Johannesburg in order to get here. And so we had to drive that 20 kilometers in the dark and it wasn't an issue. It's also been raining as well, and despite there being rain, there weren't any significant obstacles to getting here. So just to recap, where can't you go? Where it's muddy in the rainy season, where there are significant amounts of water. So if you've seen my episode on driving through the Mkhadi pans, for example, definitely can't do that with this vehicle. Must have a 4x4 with sufficient clearance. Places where it's sandy, and that is beach driving or driving close to dunes and that sort of thing as well. Difficult with a vehicle like this. In fact, almost impossible with a vehicle like this. There are sections of Namakwa National Park, for example, that you can't drive in along the coastline. Now, having said that, of course, we did go to Namakwa National Park with this vehicle and we explored a significant part of it, but we did not get into the really deep sandy areas because it was just impossible for us to go there and not get stuck. Driving down to Boulder Beach, for example, the Boulder campsite, Boulder Bay campsite where we were camping, that was actually quite an episode because it was a steep drive down and it was sandy, and so the car was bottoming out and touching on the sand. Fortunately, there was an alternative route to get out of there that didn't involve sand. But in that situation, we could get down, but we certainly could not get up on that road. So lucky for us, there was a different way out. Planning is important. There are a lot of places that you can go to in the dry season that you can't go to the wet season with a vehicle like this. And there are quite a few examples of places we've been to that you could go to in the dry season with a vehicle like this here, but I wouldn't recommend that you go to in the wet season. So we were recently in Mana Pools, for example, in Zimbabwe. Now, it's quite a corrugated road to get there, so it's relatively slow going. But if it's dry, it is, I think, very navigable in a vehicle like this. If it's in the middle of the wet season, it's not. It's going to be muddy and there's a good chance that you will get stuck. You don't want to get stuck in a Big 5 park if you're far from assistance. So planning is really important. The season that you choose to go to a place can be very significant. It can be the difference between going there and having a great time or going there and getting stuck. So that's really important planning wise. In addition to the season, of course, the roads. Like I've mentioned before, the roads are very important. So make sure when you do your planning, you have some indication of what the roads look like. Now, a good way to check that is to go on Google Street View, for example, on Google Earth or on Google Maps and go to the satellite version of it or the satellite view, and you can get some understanding of what types of roads you're expecting to encounter. Google Street View, I think, is probably the best on streets that have been traversed or that are on the Google Street View package. That's a really great way to get an idea of what you're going to encounter. How to start? Start small. Go to obvious places. Go to the Kruger National Park. Go to Pilanesberg National Park. Go to places that you are relatively sure you can get to with a vehicle like this for a couple of reasons. The most important being that it gives you some confidence with respect to the capability of your vehicle, and just a bit of experience actually just driving on dirt roads and that sort of stuff if you haven't done that or haven't done a lot of that. And you will come across quite a bit of that in many of the national parks, for example. So don't start big. Don't go to Botswana in the rainy season. Don't go to Zimbabwe and Mana Pools in the rainy season with a vehicle like this if it's your first big trip. It's not advisable. It's a good way to learn a lot of lessons very quickly, but I don't advise it. Start small. Now, we kind of started small, not really. We did a few close by camping trips for the weekend, which was great. And then we did a massive trip to Namibia for 3 weeks, and that was difficult, but it was fun and we learned a lot. So I think important to maintain that sense of adventure, and you've got to do stuff. You've got to go out and do it and enjoy it and experience it. So I don't want to like scare people into not overlanding. You've got to do it, right? And you can do it with a vehicle like this, and we have done it with a vehicle like this here. I just recommend that you start with bite-sized stuff before you get into the bigger trips. The main thing is to get out there. Just go and do it. Go and see it. Go and have fun. Go and learn some lessons. Go get stuck. Avoid it if you can. If you're going to get stuck where somebody can help you to get out, or you can help yourself to get out. The main thing is you've got to go. You've got to get out there and you've got to do cool stuff. And I think once you start doing that and you get over that initial sort of barrier of getting out there, then the world is your oyster. It's a place to explore and enjoy. And if you do get stuck, at the very least, you'll have a great adventure and lots of stories to tell. Now, insofar as the basics are concerned, if you want to know what to pack for your camping trip, then check out my episode on our camping setup, and also there's an episode on basic camping requirements, and I've got links to that below. So that's important because that'll give you an idea of what's essential to pack. And because packing space is premium in a vehicle like this here, you've really got to think that out carefully. Besides your camping gear, of course, food is important. So I've also got a good episode on that, on the top 10 items to take with you camping, and food and snacks and that sort of stuff. So that's cool as well. Have a look at that. There's a link below. It'll give you some good pointers on some important stuff. It's good to have a basic emergency kit as well. And I do have an episode on that lays out sort of specific things that you need to keep yourself out of trouble, or to get yourself out of trouble if you get into trouble. So have a look at that episode as well. It's quite dated. I think I should probably do a more recent episode now, updated with a lot of experience over the years as well. But check out that episode. There's some good clues in there as to what is essential to keep in an emergency box. The best tip I can give you is to ask questions. People like ourselves that have done a fair amount of overlanding with a vehicle like this, with the 4x4, etc. You'll get a lot of knowledge very quickly. You'll get a lot of lessons very quickly that you don't have to learn yourself, hopefully. So put a question in the comments below as well. I'll be glad to answer those. If you have anything specific that you would like me to give you some advice on, that I can give advice on, I will definitely do that as well. So definitely learn from our mistakes. You can go everywhere almost and see everything almost with a vehicle like this. And to assist, I've put a playlist together of places that we've been to that I think you can easily get to without a 4x4, and that you should not need a 4x4 to explore and enjoy. So check out that playlist as well. Just go straight to my profile, go to playlists, and you will find one for places you can go without a 4x4. If you enjoyed this, if you found it informative, hit the like button. Also subscribe. It's always good to get feedback from you guys. So leave a comment below, leave a question below if you have a question, and make sure as well that you check out the other episodes that I've recommended, that I've left links to below, and of course various other episodes that I've done on some really cool places to visit inside and outside of South Africa that you can definitely do with a vehicle like this.